Thank you all, and welcome back for day 2. It's so good to see everyone again. I am excited to be here. I want to take a special moment to thank our sponsors, particularly for all those great receptions last night, because I saw some of you rolling in this morning. Looked like you had some fun. So please join me in thanking our sponsors for the work that they do with us. So I am so privileged to be joined by Superintendent Elsie Arnson from the Montana Office of Public Instruction today. So yesterday I talked a little bit about the modernizing work that we've been talking about and modernizing systems and how an important part of that is the work we do in assessment to modernize that. And so today, Elsie is going to talk a little bit about what they're doing in Montana. This is a rapid fire. We also got time limits, and the clock is ticking. So I want you to know that we impose the same kind of restrictions on me as we do as the people sitting up here. But, Ed First did an analysis, and there are 13 states right now working on some form of through-course assessment. Mm-hmm. They're different. They're not all the same. We haven't defined them all the same, but there's some form of that happening. So, Elsie, I'm going to turn to you, Superintendent Arnson.
Thank you.
Can I call you Elsie?
You can, for sure.
So, Elsie, I want to say, we have a lot of conversations about the bold, visionary work that you've been doing in Montana, and I see today, you usually bring the bling, but today you brought the boots.
The boots.
And, I think it's endemic of the no fences approach that you're taking in Montana. Tell us a little bit about what are you trying to do in Montana?
Well, thank you. Wearing boots, I've never been to this type of a conference before as a state chief, and I've been in my 6th year, so we have some continuity there. I didn't know how deep it was going to be. So wearing the cowboy boots, I think, just pretty much goes with the no fences attitude as well. I believe in Montana, we want local control. We want local accountability. So, of course, with a statewide summative assessment where we have a lot of federal control. What we're doing in Montana, I believe every state should take a look at what we're doing. This is a classroom up model. This is recognizing the continuity of teaching and learning by that teacher. In Montana, we love our teachers. I was a classroom teacher for 23 years before I got into my elected role here. So what this model is, it is about understanding that the state standard is there, and then there is a continuum with small opportunities to recognize the success of learning throughout the year. Rather than a summative test at the end, let's have that teacher, that family, that student recognize the accountability of what that state standard reflects. And it's called ownership, folks. It's making sure that that student, that teacher, and I'll say this, and I know Scott Marion is in the back, but I believe at our TAC meeting, he called it an intimate approach. Now, intimate in government is a challenging marriage, but I believe with what Scott has said is that this is a very close connection, relationship between what is taught in the classroom and what is then being assessed. In Montana, we're also looking at our accountability system, we're looking at our state standards, and we're pulling up our teachers in a great effort toward this through-year model.
Yeah, so Scott's sitting right there, so he's actually laughing at you and agreeing with you. But, so I want to tell you the name of this is the Montana Alternative Student Testing Pilot called MAST. You piloted it last year, and you're looking to go forward with it in the next year. One of the really important characteristics, so we talked about the assessment part of it, but the number of stakeholders that you have behind this. Sometimes in small states, I was your neighbor for a while, it can be challenging because we're all family and we all carry baggage. So you did a lot of work to bring legislators, teachers, parents, district personnel along, and that's a big part of it. So if you could talk to us a little bit more about the stakeholder engagement, how did you drive that, and how does this fit into the big picture for Montana?
Right. So just geographically, we're the 4th largest state. And also, we are aging. We're a very, an older state, an experienced state, but we're aging. So we recognize the teacher workforce. And having that help from our teacher prep programs and reciprocity from other states of teachers coming in. But we're just over 1 million people in the state of Montana, 400 school districts, and we believe in local control, which means then that even though it's government school that we're working with in public school, they have their own kingdom. And making sure then that opportunity of assessment isn't top down, like I had said, that it's brought up. So the first year went very, very well. And I can say that the courageousness of our classroom teachers to raise the hand. So just a quick story. I'm elected, so I'm at a function prior to my second election, and we're in a bar. Rural Montana,
Wait,
Conrad. Yeah,
okay, all right.
Conrad, Montana. And I have this teacher coming up to me, and she's waving her long neck beer bottle rather nefariously at me. And she's saying, if you get elected this time, do what you're going to say and change assessment. And I looked at her, and I wasn't afraid. It's Montana. And I looked at her, and I said, I'm going to do that. We're working on that. And it takes time. Give us grace. Be patient. So this first year, we had 5,000 students. That's 3% of our population of students in our state. We did 5 and 7 math and ELA. We had a lot of conversations with our school leaders, but most importantly, with our teachers. And I know there's not many teachers out into this audience here, but that's where the connection of learning is happening, especially in our rural school districts. We're frontier by federal standards. So we had 5,000 students. We also have many sovereign nations in our state. And 10% of that 5,000 was recognized with our student population of tribal, making sure that our new assessment reflects our student population and who we are in Montana.
Yeah, so let's talk about what your acceleration plan is.
Yes.
And, we can give a nod to our friends from the federal government who might be here today. You received an innovative assessment grant, so there was some belief in that. But your next plan is to move into a wider scale pilot, which also requires a waiver from double testing. So let's talk about that.
So I'll start with that. Do I have any of our federal partners in the audience?
Anyone that's willing to raise their hand?
I know, willing to raise their hand. Thank you.
We love you, and we want to talk to you about the waiver that's coming.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And it's not about opening the floodgates. It's about accountability. And in Montana, we are extremely accountable, and we will be very lawful. But we're asking for, I use the word grace again. We're asking for grace so that we don't double test. Again, it's the teacher that raised its hand, and he and she said, we're in. We want to recognize the great effort we put in as teachers and also the output of success from students through learning. So we gave them 15 days. Well, that was 45 days ago. So the clock is ticking, our federal partners, and we would really appreciate Montana to be one of the first to be able to say, thank you, because you said yes. And having our federal government partners say yes is so important, Carissa.
Yeah. And there's an opportunity to spark innovation, and this is one of them. So talk to me about your vision for through-course assessments, for the broader accountability system, for your broader educational system. You had a theory of action.
We do. And let's go back just to a little bit of numbers. So we had 5,000 students in 5th and 7th math and ELA. Now we're almost to 20,000. So this is 13% of all of our population of districts and teachers that have raised their hand and said, I'm in. And if we can have more connection with more of our districts, and these are rural school districts where they don't have a capacity, where the math teacher drives the bus or is, the lunch dude or the lunch lady in all the support for our children in education. So can't do this, though, without our partners. And that's why I talked about the federal partners. But there's been a lot of benefactors as well that have really given us that bootstrap look forward. And we also know that there's many different private sector partners that are here. And to recognize the work that you do, let's step outside of that traditional school box and recognize what Montana and other states are doing. And not that you have to create a different product, but maybe a different timeline. Maybe it's a different conversation. But if you can keep students focused right there and it's the success with the teacher, then it's a win. And it's a win for Montana, for that very rural community of Conrad, as much as for a win for our nation.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to us about the theory of action. Let's go back to that.
Wonderful.
What's the goal 5 years from now?
5 years. So by 24-25, we hope to have this model of through year, 5 math testlets throughout the year, and 4 in ELA to supplant that summative. Now, what that means then, it's a tool that is going to be embraced by that school, that classroom. And one of the things that I think that we're really discussing is the parental involvement in education. They've always been there, but the pandemic had a little bit of a chilling effect. Let's warm it up a little bit. Let's have these testlets be embraced by families. It's not just about a math book that's brought home in a backpack or a digital device. It's really recognizing what that page in that math book is about. So the theory of action is basically in how do I want to say, an evolutionary process. It's not something that is going to be here to stay. We know in education, things are moving and they're escalating in that movement. And we want to be at the cusp of that every single day because we know our teachers are. So there is change to this, and there will be. And I can't say that where we're going right today is where we're going to end up at. Yep. But if we put our kids in at the very center of this, we're going to win.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just say, too, with your theory of action, you built it with those community stakeholders that I talked about. And so you're continuing to build it as you go forward, right?
Exactly. So, okay. You know, I was a union member as a classroom teacher, and we want to make sure that union is comfortable. And I believe they are. I believe that our partners that may not be traditional people that sit at our state table or sit at that district table where there might be challenges. I think this is something that is a unifying aspect with our state standard revision that we're doing in math and reading, all along with our accountability system and professionally developing and uplifting our teachers. Like I said, this is the path forward.
All right, so my last question for you, because we're getting a ticking time bomb here too. What advice do you have for other states to continue to innovate on their assessment and accountability systems? And what has been successful? What lessons have you learned?
So there was a gentleman that yelled something here yesterday that caught everybody's attention. And I think I could yell, be fearless. Be fearless. There are so many things that are occurring in education in our communities right now as we're healing. And we can't say, oh, we'll do it tomorrow. Be fearless and do it today. We used all the challenges with the pandemic to get this moving. And I believe as an elected, there's so many political wins that come to this. If you can be centered and tethered on a student, regardless of who that student culturally, economically, demographically is, I'm going to say that 3-letter word again. It's a win. And isn't that what we want right now? We want to win for our children. In Montana, our motto is the treasure state. Leading our public agency, leading the Office of Public Instruction as an elected in Montana, we know that our treasures are our children. Our treasures are our teachers. And so every single day I say that. So be fearless, go forward. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
Well, I stood into a few sessions here, and I want to commend all of you for the work that you're doing to move forward. I know there was a time when I was a participant in this conference, we spent a lot of time talking about the reasons why we couldn't do things, right? There's a lot of constraints around reasons why we couldn't. I have seen so much in this conference about how we can do things, how we can find ways through some of the barriers that we've had in the past. And I want to encourage you all to keep up those conversations, because this group is going to be who figures that out. A room full of incredible professionals, great intelligence, and we'll find a way about how we can make innovation the next step for all of us. So I will just end by thanking Superintendent Arnson and tell you that at 2:45 today, she and her team will be available. If you'd like to just stop by and chat, they will be in Bolden 3 at 2:45 today. Please join me in thanking Superintendent Arnson.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Scott Norton from CCSSO. I'm still here, so a few more days. I'm very excited. Thanks, Carissa. Thanks, Superintendent Arnson, for that deeper look into what's happening in Montana. We could hear you backstage. And I'm very excited to introduce today's fantastic speakers who will close out the plenary session. First, we'll hear from Taryn Thomas, co-founder at EdLight, who will share her insights on the importance of reimagining an infrastructure that puts student work at the forefront. And then Brian Gong from the Center for Assessment, who will share 5 suggestions for making assessment and accountability systems more impactful. And Stephanie Cawthon, professor at UT Austin. Part of Stephanie's research is about ableism, and she will talk about how addressing ableism can support the development of accessible assessment systems. Susan Lyons, principal consultant at Lyons Assessment Consulting, who will make the case that exploring alternative models for school accountability is imperative. John Twing, senior vice president at the Pearson School Assessment and Qualification, will provide his perspective on student assessment over the past 40 years and offer advice on what is needed for the future. After John, we'll ask Scott Marion to come to the front. Scott had travel issues yesterday and just arrived this morning, so he was unable to make it yesterday, so we're definitely glad to hear from Scott. And thanks in advance for your patience as we make that adjustment. Taryn?
All right. Good to see everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Taryn. But my big question for the day is, how is lunch? How is it, right? Okay. Sounds like it was better on this side. Well, I guess we could look at what percentage of the food was left on your plate. And that's probably a good way to measure that. But I suppose that wouldn't really take into consideration all of the different preconditions that I would want to be thinking about. For example, did everybody have a balanced breakfast? You're educators, so no. And what about the quality of conversation and engagement at your table? I suppose assuming everyone at the table had an equally satisfying breakfast and no one is experiencing any other pre-existing conditions that may keep them from enjoying the meal, then maybe the amount of food you have consumed here would be able to tell us something about how engaged you were at the conversation happening around you. You probably get where I'm going with this. We love to quantify, we love to parse, we love to measure. And that's because we believe that if we measure something, we can understand it. And if we can understand it, well, then we've solved it. Like the secrets of the universe revealed, finally, we've got it all figured out. But why are we here? I know the chicken was good and it is New Orleans, but it's probably not about those two things. You came for the conversation, you came for the interaction, and you came for the learning. And yet, our objective measurement has no ability to capture that information, and it's literally why we're here. The whole point of this conference. And yet we cannot say definitively anything about learning and interaction happening beyond our assumptions that if you were talking more, perhaps you were eating less. So even though we care more about that than anything else, the measurement we built was incapable to tell us anything meaningful. And so assessment for measurement's sake versus assessment for learning is where we get hung up. And I'm here to humbly ask that we reevaluate our priorities, that we shake loose the belief that standardized assessments are the only or the best way to measure student learning, and that we should maybe think about restructuring our routines, our infrastructures, and our systems that have often been used to evaluate and operationalize test scores. And instead of thinking about just efficiency, because we know time is our most scarce resource, that we actually think about what is the environment that is necessary to integrate feedback practices into instruction to really drive the learning outcomes for students. And how do we take that to a summative assessment level? And what do we sacrifice if we are losing efficiency? Well, I would argue we are currently sacrificing learning, and that just doesn't sit right with me. So, assessments do not have to be tests in the traditional sense at all. Rather, they can be carried out through feedback, through teacher observations, student portfolios of work. In fact, research has shown that if the goal is authentic learning, there should be a greater focus on authentic student work. And that means that we need to reimagine our infrastructures. Data-driven instruction can work, and there's a place for standardized testing and a comprehensive assessment system. But that doesn't mean we should abandon time-honored research-backed practices that we know can improve student outcomes and validate teacher experience and expertise. The lack of attention to student work is one of the greatest injustices of modern education. And when you think about students, particularly those that look like me, it happens even more so. So we have created a system that's obsessed with scores, and I'm saying, do you have the appetite, pun intended, to make a system that's equally obsessed with learning? Thank you. I can kick it over to Brian.
I'm Brian Gong from the Center for Assessment. I'm glad to be here because in the over 30 years that I've been attending the CCSSO National Assessment Conference, I've seen powerful ideas take hold and result in real improvements in assessment practices and ultimately in outcomes for students. Today, I'd like to modestly suggest a handful of practical things that states and their partners might do to make our assessments more beneficial. The first is that I would suggest that we can make our content standards and our performance standards much richer and more informative. These content and performance standards are intended to guide the development of our assessments. They are the core of the interpretations that our reports are supposed to support, and they also serve to help people do things like align curriculum and learning expectations with the state expectations. There are many people who have provided examples of how content and performance standards could be more complete and better done. I'll give an example of the type of work that might be necessary in this area. These are 8 definitions of different types of growth and expertise that were drawn from problem-solving literature. We tend to focus on the first 2. But if we were to say we want to know how students are growing in expertise, I submit that it's really important that we know what we're talking about. We should say which, if maybe there are more than one type of growth and expertise we're interested in. And so we need to define the construct and claim carefully. We need to design our assessment to be sensitive to what we're actually interested in. And then I think that part of the future is that in our content and performance descriptions, we're going to have additional detail for individual students and student groups that are unique to their situations. My second suggestion is that we validate our content performance standards. Currently, our content performance standards largely rest upon the process that committees do. But if we look at what other people are doing, especially in this case, my example is drawn from institutions of higher ed and businesses, they are developing assessments and competencies that, for example, merge 21st century skills with academic content, and they're devising assessments that accurately assess these things and are useful for others. Wouldn't it be great if our K-12 high school assessments that proclaim readiness for post-secondary were actually used by colleges and employers? My third suggestion is that we leverage the validation of data that are available in order to bring coherence across the educational system. I'll give 3 examples. They're all dealing with looking at opportunity to learn. The first one is that the state collects information about grading, college-going testing, and college outcomes. You can see that there are differences. These 2 schools are similar in some ways and different in others. I think it invites us to have a conversation about how there could be more coherence between the different signals that are being given to students. The second one comes from California. They are interested in the quality of course offerings. They actually publish a list of which courses by school are aligned to the state university's expectations for Algebra 1. And I think it's interesting. If I were a parent, I would be very interested if my student in my school needed to take Algebra 1A, 1A and 1B, or perhaps even an honors course in order to be qualified for the university. This last one's a well-known one. Teachers who are more effective or more highly distributed in schools with less poverty. Teachers who are less effective occur in greater concentrations in schools with higher poverty. That's not the type of coherence we'd like. My fourth one is that we should develop accountability systems that really reflect what we want. We know that we need to do ESSA. My suggestion here is that we can do things outside of ESSA, either a state system, or I'll give an example of what I'm calling ESSA Other. In ESSA Other, schools that are labeled as other under the ESSA system then go into a state accountability system. And the state accountability system can be anything the state wants. They can put any indicator in, here it's local indicators. My point is that these different types of accountability approaches can be implemented immediately without ESSA reauthorization. Both allow considerable freedom in terms of what can be put in that doesn't need to go through peer review, but states do need to identify schools for CSI, ATSI, and TSI. What type of flexibility do states have? Here are outcomes from 22-23 for 2 states. The state on the left identifies 7% of their schools. Obviously, they figured a way for their plan to be approved that's quite different from the state on the right. My last is that states, agencies, and others should commit to using data to inform actions. If you see a problem, don't just collect data and publish it, but actually do something about it at the state level. I think Mississippi is a great example about taking action about reading. Because of the leadership and capacity in this room, I'm confident that we can make great progress in making our assessments better and more useful, even if we do with things that we are already think that we're currently doing well. Thank you.
I want to start today with a note of gratitude. First, to Scott for his leadership and service to our community. Second, to all of you for being here and for being present and engaged. I will say yesterday I had one of my top 10 breakout sessions, and that is amazing after 25 years. So there's real stuff happening here. So thank you to all of you. The third group I'd like to thank is the many people working behind the scenes to make us comfortable, to make us fed, and to make this whole event accessible. CCSSO, hotel staff, I see you. Thank you. I want to take a moment to ask you to think back to the last meeting you had, conference you went to, or perhaps session you facilitated, focusing on accessibility, disability, and assessment. Think about who was there, think about what was on the agenda, and think about the strategies that were formed. I ask you if at any point was the concept of ableism raised, directly or indirectly. I'm here today to offer that we might return to those roots of why we need more accessible assessment systems in the first place, why accommodations need to be part of our everyday thought about what our test formats appear to be. I was walking through the exhibit halls of several disability-related conferences in the last 3 years, and I saw many solutions, many technologies, many people saying, here's what I can sell you. And not once did they recognize that ableism is the reason why we are here in the first place. So here's my working definition of ableism. Attitudes and behaviors that support the idea that people with disabilities are inferior to people without. I see this every day in my classroom. My disabled students come to me and tell me stories of what their experiences have been like from childhood till their day yesterday. In the workplace, we know that ableism is both explicit and implicit in how meetings are run, events are hosted, and how jobs are allocated throughout the employment career process. It's there, we just need to find it and fix it. We have shadow experiences in our education systems, where the buildings look the same, perhaps, but the individual students are having different experiences of education. And I report to you that ableism is one of the shadow effects that our students experience. Another working definition of accessibility. This reflects an accessible mindset, not an accessible checklist. Accessibility as the opportunity to engage authentically with people, ideas, and oneself. When we're creating an accessible environment, I encourage you to think about these three things. That access is not the burden of disabled people to advocate and fight for at every moment for themselves. The system needs to be set up with that in mind. Access is more than accommodations. And I've done 25 years of research on accommodations, and I'm saying I'm not done. That's not enough. The mindset matters. And the third thing is that access must be intentional. It doesn't happen after the fact. Those people making us all comfortable, they had a plan. Access comes with planning and reiterating and thinking through and learning. I also encourage you to think about the people who are involved in every step of your assessment process, from development to delivery to dissemination. We talk about parents. We were talking about parents backstage, how important our parents are, and that even our parents who have disabilities need to be able to have meaningful conversations about their kids and their development. So each of you is an influencer. Channel your inner Beyoncé. Find out where you can shape the ideas of the people around you. TikTok not required. Find out what your role is in your place with your people to reduce ableism. If you want to find out more, I'll see you at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Susan Lyons, and my favorite work is when I get to partner with states and organizations, many of you in this room, to build and imagine what the future of assessment and accountability might be. Today, I'm going to present a framework that I developed with my colleague, Dr. Standy Student, to help us all collectively reimagine what that future might be. Over the last 20 years, state accountability has remained largely the same. States administer tests of student learning relative to statewide content standards. The scores and other indicators are combined to rank order schools according to a state-established formula, and then states administer resources and supports for school improvement. While we have seen some modest and isolated success in improving student outcomes under this model, I think we can all agree that it has not delivered on the kind of transformative, sustainable, lasting change that we had hoped to see, particularly for our most marginalized students. So I invite us to all imagine what it might be. We've been trapped under the same model for 20 years. It can be difficult to think about what's possible. So that's why we put forth this framework. Along the first dimension is goal setting. We ask that we allow ourselves to imagine what might change if the locus of control around who sets the goals for school accountability is different. Who sets the aims for what we're trying to do? Along our second dimension, we have evaluation. Here, we think about who is in charge of evaluating quality, who makes determinations about next steps and consequences. Using this framework, at least 5 models for accountability emerge. We have our current accountability systems in the bottom right, and as we change the locus of control along either or both of these dimensions, new models appear. In our paper and at my session later this afternoon, we'll go through examples of each, but for the sake of time here, I'll just talk about one, locally enacted models. Locally enacted models are where the state or federal government would determine the parameters or the minimum expectations that states must comply with in order to design an accountability system. But it would be at the local level that schools and districts would actually enact the evaluation and determination of quality. So we have a long-standing precedent for local enacted models in our country in graduation. Right now, in most states, states have statutory requirements and regulations around what graduation must consist of. Right? So often there's course credit requirements and composition of courses that students must take, but it's at the local level that graduation is really instantiated. Locals determine their own graduation policies and they make their own evaluations as to whether students have met those requirements. We have a precedent for really valuing this locally enacted model in our country. Right? Not only do we accept this as legitimate, but even comparable. Graduation rate is a key indicator in our current accountability systems. What might change if we reimagined federal accountability as school accountability writ large as a locally enacted model? This could look a number of ways. One way it could look would be that states or the feds require that states administer a minimum number of standardized tests, once per grade span in math, ELA, and science, for example, right? Locals would then use that test score data, be publicly available, disaggregated. Locals would use that test score data in their own local evaluation processes. And if it's determined that schools aren't meeting the target, they could then opt into or apply for resources and supports from the state. This is sort of a relatively minor change, but potentially really radical, right? It changes the dynamics between the locals and the states in a way that's really engaging and participatory at the local level. It has the potential to really change things for us here. Whatever our future assessment and accountability systems might be, let's leverage what we've learned about the science of systems improvement over the last 20 years. We know that it requires that not only do people who the system is intended to influence agree with the aims of the system, but they actually have legitimate and sustained participation in bringing about those improvements. Just as assessment for learning is explicitly designed to leverage motivational factors for students, let's think about school evaluation for improvement in terms of attending to the human mechanisms by which we expect that improvement to occur. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. My name's John Twing. I'm a psychometrician. I'm still employed by Pearson until Friday. I'll be gone fishing after Friday. The first assessments I built were in 1980. Much has changed since then, but oddly enough, everything's still the same. I'm going to share some perspective on this with an anecdote and some messages here in the next few minutes. For years, I watched educators in biased review meetings interrogate test questions, looking to explain difference in group performance, often with the conclusion that they could find none, so let's keep the item in the item pool. During the Maldiff litigation in Texas, Judge Pareto turned to me while I was on the witness stand and asked, "Are there any questions in your item bank that have p-values that show the Hispanic students outperform the white students?" And I said, "No, sir, there are none." He said, "Don't you think maybe that's a problem?" That question has haunted me every day since. One of the greatest things about being old is that I get to see what we've been able to accomplish and achieve over the years as the evolution of our industry has moved forward. But what I also get to see are the things I could not get done or couldn't do on my own. Somewhere we lost our focus trying to make assessments fair for everyone by defaulting to statistical procedures, checking the box, and not engaging in the more difficult and less objective notion that some human judgment across diverse contexts must be considered and some compromises must be agreed. In 1958, E.F. Lindquist was invited to speak at the first ETS Invitational Conference on Testing. Reading the conference proceedings made me feel like I was in a rerun of Groundhog Day. As many of the issues Dr. Lindquist in '58 was trying to solve still plague us today. For example, one of the major points Dr. Lindquist wanted to make was that more clarity was needed around the role of the test builder. For example, he said, our task, the test builder, is fundamentally one of finding a type of test that will not just serve a single well-defined purpose, but that will satisfy a fairly large number of diverse requirements, end quote. Now remember, this was before IRT, but uncorrelated measures was still the assumption of the day. His suggestion begs a bigger question. Does the purpose of an assessment drive the design of the assessment? Well, from my point of view, not if you look closely. For example, current rhetoric would have you believe that college and career readiness are one and the same. While I believe there's a lot of overlap, there are huge differences in what you need to be prepared for college versus what you need to be prepared for the workplace. And yet, assessment developers ignore this. The purpose of, as another example, the purpose of an algebra test in high school is quite clear, isn't it? It's to measure algebra, right? Well, if you make it a graduation requirement, all of a sudden it does more than that. Something presumably Lindquist would like. But it has the problem it's fraught with driving unintended consequences like the watering down of algebra content to increase passing rates. Our future will require that we have more robust measures of application and process. We've all seen this at firsthand. The engineer, the software engineer in the room is the most combative and difficult person to work with. Hence, passing an engineering, that's an inside joke for those of you who don't recall it. Hence, passing an engineering exam or getting an engineering certificate is not enough. Collaborative problem solving, relationship building, planning are all required to be successful for college or career in the future. Lindquist would seem to agree with me. In fact, he might have been a prophet. As he said in 1958, the examination is concerned directly with the development of generalized intellectual skills and abilities, or what the students can do with what they have learned. It should be concerned only indirectly with what the student has learned in the sense of specific items of information or bits of knowledge. Yet, we seem to be stuck in factories of information regurgitation, fueled arguably by allegedly single-purposed assessments, cranking out isolated information without integration, application, or context. Surely, this is something all y'all are going to need to change because I'm going to be fishing as we go forward. If you were intrigued or angered or upset by anything I had to say here, come to our 2 o'clock session. We'll straighten you out.
Man, John, that's a tough act to follow, all of you. So, I'm Scott Marion. I'm the executive director of the Center for Assessment. And many of you know this, but most of you don't know, I'm really happy to be here now. It was quite a trip. I was counting on John to be the cranky old man, but I'm going to actually be the cranky old man in this talk and talk about some of the things that have been bugging me for the last 25 years or so. So we throw around terms in our field like formative assessment, diagnostic, interim, universal screeners, benchmarks, you name it. And the problem is we use the same terms to mean different things, and we actually define different things with the same terms. And I contend it's a problem because it gets in the way of building assessment literacy. We started this back, Brian and Mary Ann Perry and I, more than 15 years ago. We thought we were going to solve this problem by defining this term interim assessment. And we were trying to describe these use cases for all these quote unquote in the middle assessments. Honestly, though, we were also trying to stop people from co-opting the use of the formative assessment literature to try to sell products that were anything but formative. Did it work? Sort of, but not nearly as much as we had hoped. And to get a sense of the problem, when we started this work, Mary Ann did a search on these various terms, formative, benchmark, diagnostic, and no matter what she searched on, the same list of tests and companies came up, pretty much in the same order. So how could they all be either formative or diagnostic or progress monitoring? It was magic, but it was really obfuscated what they do and what they were intended to be used for. I haven't given up on this rant. When COVID hit and we all naively thought perhaps that kids were going to go back to school in the fall of 2020, there was a lot of call for diagnostic assessments. We're thinking about that we would need this information to be able to figure out what kids missed and what they need to learn to be successful. Except the problem was they were talking about the same interim assessments we just got finished railing about before. And why did this matter? People thought they were going to get targeted information to address students' specific instructional needs. In general, they didn't, at least not from the assessments that were and still are peddled as diagnostic. Names matter. Those who've been around know that I have a new pet peeve, as relatively new, universal screeners. It appears that states and districts are using these quote-unquote universal screeners for all students, maybe that's the universal part, but also to detect for all possible educational challenges or opportunities. I've seen the same screener being purported to be used for screening kids for dyslexia. I think that's probably one of the original intended purposes and a good one, but also to identify kids for gifted and talented programs. How could the same assessment, no matter what link was said, how could the same assessment be used for such a wide variety of purposes? And I just think this amorphous terminology creates massive confusion. I want to thank my friends. I think they have bought a whole table over here. My friends at Curriculum Associates putting together this chart. This is not an eye test, I promise. It's just to show across 5 states and at 4 different grade levels, the quote-unquote universal screener requirements are quite different. So what's the universal? Are they only universal within state and grade? I mean, it's just we have to, this lack of clarity really gets in the way. Now, you know this, I could go on, and there's some talks, but if you want to see at 2 o'clock, Carla Evans and I are going to be talking about one of our latest obsessions, instructional utility. And I'm really not that much of a cranky old measurement guy. I'm just concerned that it really eats away at this desperate need to increase assessment literacy. We could do better. When educators get labels such as formative and diagnostic, they expect to get information they could use. Students suffer an opportunity cost as well because teachers are potentially misled of providing the right kind of interventions for kids. I'm not blaming anyone, well, some people, but not really anyone in this room. State policymakers, they just showed, foster a lot of this assessment literacy, but we as a community in this room and others could lead. instead of relying on vague terms, we should be very clearly describing the purposes, uses, claims, and most importantly, the evidence associated with our purported uses. So that's our charge. Now, just a point of privilege, since we were kids together in this field back in the late 90s, Scott and I were assessment directors trying to understand the NCLB or the coming NCLB, and we've had a long run in many interesting places. I and so many others have benefited from your contributions to this field, but most importantly, we've benefited from your kindness and humility, and we're going to miss you.
All right, one more time, let's hear it for our speakers. So just a couple of quick reminders. We'll get you out of here in 1 minute. The plenary session breakouts, as you've heard, will be 2 to 2:45 today. Check your app. You can hear more from Superintendent Artson from 2:45 to 3:30 in Bolden 3. That's that way. And finally, tonight there will be a reception sponsored by our friends from Pearson in this room, 5 o'clock to 6:30. Thanks again for being here. Have a great afternoon. Let's go fishing, John.